Hi, this is Ted, and today I'm going to be talking about faith, healing again. Yes, because I think I'm going to be probably wrapping up a lot of this stuff and kind of summarizing, and I'll be summarizing through Richard Casdorph's, Dr. Richard Casdorph, he's a legitimate doctor, Richard Casdorph's book on miracles, where he takes 10 miracles, looks at them, studies them, and concludes these are real miracles, and most of them in his book had a lot to do with Kathryn Kuhlman, who was big, huge back in the 1970s, 1960s. I was in several of her different auditoriums, in the choir a couple of times, and on the stage, once getting healed, quote unquote. Me and my friends looked at each other the next day and said, "What happened?" What happened? Because none of us were healed. It took us all by surprise. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but that's part of the reason why I got into this whole thing on faith healing, trying to understand what's going on. There are a couple of books battling with each other. The one was by a doctor who was given permission to research Kathryn Kuhlman, her ministry. He worked with her for a day, helping people bring in wheelchairs and stuff like that, giving wheelchairs to people who are walking, and help, older people or people who are struggling with walking, put them in a wheelchair, and then because it helps them so they can go into the ministry and watch Kathryn Kuhlman. They don't have to walk so far. Nice. Except on the other side of that, they're the first ones up there on stage. I'm healed. And how do we know? Well, the ushers are bringing the wheelchair up, showing everybody this person could not walk. Okay, it's a little trickery. Yeah. But still, something is going on in that person because they are convinced they're getting healed. Placebo. Then after a while, they return back to that and they think, do I lose faith? Did I lose faith? Did I need to hold on to this by faith? And what these people face is not a lack of faith, not losing their faith. It is the placebo stopped working. They were never healed in the first place. It's just our response of our brain covers up the pain and the stuff that's going on. That's all it does. And it covers it up, and it can only last so long. So it comes back. Now, I'm going to get into some of this stuff while I talk about Casdorph, because Casdorph's another doctor who is very upset at the first doctor who comes out and says, the first doctor, William Nolan, writes a book, and he's looking for miracles, and only one chapter dealing with Kathryn Kuhlman, and he was given permission to follow up on 70-some different people. He was able to get out of that somewhere around 30 people that he actually was able to continue the follow-up and with doctors and the whole works, and he found nobody was healed. In fact, one person who actually, what she did on stage damaged her spine permanently because she was jumping around on stage. My pain is gone. Well, she had a back that needed to be supported. All right, enough of that. I need to go through this relatively quickly. And Casdorph's book, I'm going to summarize all 10 miracles. I talked a little bit about this with the first few chapters, but I need to just summarize his whole book. I was actually hoping for better than what I got from a miracle point of view, because despite the fact that I do this with miracles and say it's all placebo or it's all that, but the fact of the matter is, I do believe there are miracles that do take place. And it wouldn't upset my day if I found out that, a few actually happened in Kathryn Kuhlman's crusades. Why? Because I do believe God does heal. There's more that I'll possibly get into in the future, but let's get into this book and just tear it down. The first thing I notice about him is I did not like Casdorph. I would rather say I was disappointed with him for several reasons. Number one, his follow-up was not good at all. He relied heavily on anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is people telling him, talking to him, oh yeah, I feel really good. There's so much involved with anecdotal evidence because testimonies rely heavily on a lot of exaggeration, making up stuff. A lot of times even people who really mean well will emphasize how bad it was and then how good it is now, when the truth is probably in the middle. So there's all kinds of stuff. Plus you got these people, I got to name it to claim it. And I've seen that on a Catherine Kuhlman stage. And he was saying, last year I was healed in your audience, but the pain came back. And so I need to confess this in front of everybody in order for it to stay. And I can see Catherine I don't think she buys into that theology, but so she tried to get him off the stage as fast as possible. Nevertheless, it is going on in a lot of places. Back about 100 years ago, they were doing a little follow-up on one evangelist, and they found a guy and his wife, and the guy his face was just marred with cancer and the whole works, and he's bleeding, he's got pus and all this kind of stuff. And he says, oh, yeah, I was healed. And he believes, and he's still claiming that he's healed. That's why I say anecdotal evidence is not, I don't buy it. And the real stuff, and it bothers me because anything that really may have happened, any real miracle that did take place, I can't accept it because there's 99% of what you're hearing in anecdotal evidence is not good. It's just not legit. He rarely in his follow-up provides any kind of medical follow-up. He tends to rely more on the anecdotal. Most of the people were recently healed, and that's the next problem. I would like to see 5 to 10 years down the road. Let's say I have cancer and I'm going through remission, but I give all the credit to God. God did this to me. But then the cancer comes back after I've been telling everybody I've been healed. So I'd like to see a little further down the road because it's rare, but sometimes placebo or other things can be involved that'll last up to a year, maybe a little longer. I'll just leave that right there. I don't see him checking up any real long-term healing. Secondly, being in the 1970s, placebos were not well thought of in many circles. They're on the verge of being understood. A lot of doctors struggle with it or just reject it. He doesn't bring up placebo at all. And you can tell that he does not understand what's going on with placebos. In fact, the second chapter in this book, he already talks about spontaneous remission. Spontaneous remission is something that doctors know about, that somebody may have nothing to do with faith or anything else, but somehow they just kind of like this healing seems to take place. And they don't have a great explanation for it, so they call it spontaneous remission. And he says this is not spontaneous remission. Why? Because at the Catherine Kuhlman crusade, this person was healed immediately. And spontaneous remission does not do that. It takes time. But what does go immediately? Placebo effect. That's immediate. And these people also experience this warmth, this heat. Well, this is typical. Benny Hinn will say you will experience warmth or heat. And Benny Hinn capitalizes in placebos. Next, I call it God of the Gaps, but God of the Gaps is something that non-Christians will accuse Christians of, that we just make up. Things that we don't understand, we just apply to God. And there's a certain level of truth to that, especially in the area of faith healing. We don't understand placebos. We don't understand, that's totally, most people don't get that at all. No, most people aren't spending their hours of day looking at placebos and trying to understand how that works with, most of them have no clue. And so definitely something happened up on stage. I felt it. And I felt my sinuses for an hour, completely healed. So I understand how powerful placebos are. And I also understand how temporary they are in most cases. They're not always temporary. That's another area. he does fall into that because he doesn't understand placebos, and because he does understand spontaneous remission, he uses the evidence of that instantaneous healing as proof that this person was really healed by a miracle. I don't buy it. He also relies very heavily on doctors' verdicts and on the medicine of his day, which I understand. But the medicine of his day was not perfect. Neither is ours today. And so there's going to be some stuff that, a doctor might say this or that. I had a doctor say to me that he said my lungs, because they were damaged in a car accident, I would not have full use of them for the rest of my life. Well, I've run marathons now, so there's a lot of stuff that he said didn't live up to what happened in real life. But that was back in the 1970s, and is also a doctor's opinion, and doctors are not always 100% right. Finally, if there were miracles in this book, unfortunately, the doctor fails to present a good case, and I compare this to a trial where a court decides to let a murderer go because the prosecuting attorney did a terrible job of establishing guilt. And that is what I think Casdorph does. He does not do a great job of establishing guilt. So if there were any miracles that really took place that he was covering, he didn't do a good enough job in my books. All right, this is Ted. Have a good one. And don't forget to subscribe, to like, and all that. Comment, push that little bell, whatever. Just, all right, we'll see you. Bye.